You've got questions about fitness, nutrition, mindset, health as a whole, and I'm here to help answer them. From fat loss and strength training to post rehab and building a truly sustainable approach to wellness, my goal is to help you build a strong, healthy body and mind that actually lasts. I'm Ray Cook, and if you're ready for practical, no fluff guidance that you can use right away, you're in the right place. So let's dive in. But the question is, how many days a week do I really need to work out to see results? Going on to context, still one of the top New Year questions every year. People want the minimum effective dose, not perfection, often paired with, is 3 days enough, or can short workouts actually work? So the cool piece is it kind of answers a handful of questions right there. But let's start with the bigger, broader question. First off, is how many days a week do I really need to work out to see results? We've talked about this off and on, I think throughout the year, a good handful of times, but it's definitely something to ponder more often than not, because we might get in the realm of thinking like, I need to hit this amount because that's what I've done in the past and it seemed to be just perfect, or I've seen that this can be really helpful, maybe I need to shift into that realm. A lot of times the biggest piece to focus on is how can I apply the amount of duration or the amount of excuse me, workouts in the week that makes the most sense for my schedule. That is the most important thing or statement that any of us can make, is when it comes to how many days a week do I do it, what can you do realistically? Not what do you think is the best choice, not what do you think sounds like it's going to make me happy. What makes the most sense to you realistically? Practice it and see if that still makes sense after applying that practice. Meaning, like, let's say if you take the example on here where it says, is 3 days enough? It can be, sure. But if you do 3 days and you find out you're really consistent with 2, that third day is almost always a hit or miss. Maybe you get it like once a month. Maybe 3 days is not right for you. Does that mean that you're missing out on some potential gains or improvements on things? Not necessarily. It can benefit us all if we had a little bit extra, but there is a curve where it comes into, this is like the right amount, this is the ideal amount, this is like the sweet spot, and then just past that is like, now we have diminishing returns. So we have to ask ourselves those types of questions when we're thinking about how many days a week do you really need to work out. The blanket statement to start out, and I've seen this be true with damn near everybody in here, 1 time a week is sufficient enough to see a result of workout. If you do a workout 1 time a week, that is sufficient enough to see results. Will that be the case forever? Very doubtful, but it can be a really good spark or an ignition sequence to building into more, because it's giving you momentum. But if you're doing, like, if you're going on this for like, let's say 2-3 years and you're at 1 time a week, questionable at best if that's going to have a big outcome in terms of long lasting large results. That's okay though, because we're not focused in that moment on like what's the big scheme of like what do you want to do in the long term. The focus at that point is, what can I do to get things moving, which is 1 time a week. Some of you guys have told me when I've talked to you like the beginning portions of your journey through doing all this stuff together is, you'll oftentimes, I'll hear at least, you'll want to do like 3 or 4 times a week. Sometimes I've heard upwards of 6. And my question usually is, first, do you think that that's sustainable and realistic for you? And the second one is, how are we going to make this happen if and when you don't hit that number? If the answer to those questions isn't like, oh, I'll make it happen no matter what, then we need to reevaluate. It's okay not to hit a large amount of workouts is really what I'm trying to say in this. So keeping it lower end, 1 to 2 workouts in the week, upwards of 3, is usually better, not perfect, but better for the majority of us. Doing more than 3 sounds great on paper. Execution and realistic world-wise doesn't end up happening the same way that we would like it to. So it is a balancing act in that perspective, but it's also finding out what is realistic for you and how comfortable do you feel with spending that amount of time or focus doing it. So it kind of ties in well with this next question that is posed, which is, can short workouts actually work? I think tying them in branches out the conversation a bit more. So when it comes to how many days in the week do I really want to work out, or do you need to work out to see results? If your answer is 1 to 2, I would say try your best to scrap the short workouts idea. Because if you're doing 1 to 2 workouts in the week, you want to make sure that those 1 to 2 workouts are as are as varied as kind of possible, meaning we hit a larger variety of muscle groups within each one or two of those workouts to make sure you get the most benefit, which means there's almost not a chance in hell where you can do it in a short time frame because it just doesn't make sense to cram all this stuff in to this 1 or 2 days. You can, but it becomes cumbersome. So you have to be kind of strategic in the approach that you take if you're going to do 1 or 2, especially in the week, because you want to choose the big lifts that are going to have the biggest bang for your buck, as well as the weak points that you're tending to notice for yourself or the areas of importance for yourself that may be easily ignored if you did either too much or too little. So you want to pick kind of a multitude of things. If your idea is I want to do more workouts in the week, meaning like maybe you're saying like I want to do 4 or 5 workouts in the week, that granted, that could include walks for all that I'm aware when I talk to you guys. Sometimes as I like open up that end of questioning, it's like, oh no, I just want to lift weights like 2 times and I want to walk a couple extra. That's a different story. If we're only though looking at lifting weights, resistance training workouts, like that's kind of where I'm basing this whole conversation off of today. Then if you go upwards of like 4-ish workouts, maybe 5-ish workouts, depending on what it is that you're aiming for, depending on what's realistic, depending on what it is that like the long-term goal viewpoint is, then we can manipulate things a little bit differently. So I got to flip my phone so I don't get distracted when I get messages. So in that thought process, if you're, let's take for me, for example, because I can really easily talk about my stuff. So if you're in my situation where you work more than 40 hours a week pretty consistently, you have a kid, you got a family, you're busy, you don't have much extra time to spare. I'm not going to say that if you're going for 4 or 5 workouts in the week, each of those should be an hour. That's a lot. It's asking a lot for most people that are ridiculously overwhelmed and busy with things. So in that context, if you can do 4 or 5 workouts in the week and that's what you want to do it, but shrink the duration. Maybe at that point you focus on a really dialed in specific 30 to 45 minute maximum window of time, meaning from warm up to cool down is that time frame. Because a lot of times what I'll get mixed up with, if I don't ask this question, is I'll hear, and it's easy to just sink into this thought process, is I'll hear 30 to 45 minute window of workout, and I'll lean into thinking like, oh, you just want like the workout time to be this, excluding warm up and cool down. But if you get into that world and you're thinking, oh, I only have 30 to 45 minutes to give to my workouts, including warm up and cool down, it can dramatically change things with how the structure goes, with how your programming goes, with how the workouts go. Everything can shift and change. So when it comes to if I don't have a whole lot of time to give and I want to hit more days in my week, shrink that time, condense it, but find out what the maximal time you have available is. Because if it's truly 30 minutes, like mine's 45, I got to be in and out in 45 minutes. Otherwise, it just does not work. It does not fit into the schedule because I got to bail out early. And it pisses me off to have to bail out early. So what I have to do is make sure in my warm up to cool down, that whole window of time takes no more than 45 minutes. So in that context, I can always guarantee I can show up given the time constraints that I have. So in the context of the question of how many days a week do I really need to work out and can short workouts actually work, both of those can be true. You don't have to work out often and you don't have to work out long, but you do have to find and will ideally want to find a middle ground to meet what's realistic for you. So just to wrap this whole thing up, to summarize the whole thing, how many days a week do you really need to work out to see results? 1, but it's not going to last long. So try for 2 to 3. That's ideal in that context. Can short workouts actually work? Meaning like 15, 30, 45 minutes? Absolutely. But you have to have a strategy and an idea of exactly how you're going to structure this, build it, and progress it. Because if you don't know how to do those things, or you're not comfortable with where to do those things, it becomes messy. So in that whole grand scheme of things, I hope that answered the question that ChatGPT posed. Were there any questions that you guys got curious on? Or was there an area where I started to dip into that you're like, this sounds like something I need more elaboration on, or I want more clarity on this piece? Let me know that stuff. Because again, the cool thing with this ChatGPT question list that it came up with for us, which is really cool, is it just sparks or ignites the conversation for you guys to actually piggyback off of and ask different types of questions that may relate perfectly, that may relate completely differently, but they spark different questions. That's the whole premise of this. That's why I wanted to make sure that we have something to kind of pull from on that. But let me know in the replay or in the comments in the replay, and then I'll make a list if there are questions to make sure that I talk about those at the forefront of the next conversation, and then we lead into the next one. So we always have like this pool of questions to build off of, but then we have something to go with as well as a backup. So that is the gist for today. Thank you guys for hanging out with me. I hope maybe you learned something when it comes to workout stuff. I don't know, but let me know. But you guys go have a fantastic weekend. I'm excited for the fact that we're halfway through the month and all of you guys are showing up to the best of your ability. Keep doing what you're doing. Proud of you guys. So go enjoy yourself. If you need anything, let me know. Let's get after it. Bye, guys. You got a question for the next Q&A? Drop it in the comments. If you want deeper support, consider subscribing or joining our coaching community where we host multiple live calls every week. The link's in the description. And if this helped you in any way, please share it with someone who's also working on their health too. And remember to stay active, eat mindfully, think positive thoughts, and let's get after it.